refinement player should be that guy who's played his 8 to 10 to 11 years, who really should be at the peak of his powers. He knows the system, he knows his body, he knows where he's actually at, understands systems and structures, really should be at the peak of his power. And at this stage we start to judge them on what they actually are. That's not saying the players still can't improve whilst they're in this refinement phase, but generally you're accepting of this is where they're at as a player. And the succession one is really the players who are in the 30 plus category of their career, who in many ways you're almost planning for them not to be key players in your system. And that's not saying that they are. In the main, they often, you get some players who are still at the very peak of their powers at 30, 31 years of age, but often they've had a bit of a history of injury, or there's some reason why you're starting to plan beyond them. And that's the rating we give these guys is an historical rating, because you're trying to measure what you're actually losing out of your team at that stage of their development. We rank them over a 7-point scale. A 7-point scale is statistically used a lot, and we do that. We try to bring 7-point scale in regard to just about every judgment we make over every level, whether that's whether we're talking about football, the business, all our judgments are made over this scale. And it's just simply one where we say from poor, fair, average, good, very good, excellent, outstanding. And by definition, in terms of the list matrix, an outstanding player would be a player who would be a stand-up All-Australian. Expect him to play All-Australian in any year of which he participates in. Health would be the only reason why potentially he wouldn't be that. An excellent player is a guy who would be a regular All-Australian, would be a regular best and fairest winner, would be a guy that you would still see as loosely termed as a champion of at least of your club and potentially of the game. A very good player is a player who's capable of winning a best and fairest. But would be seen as an exceptional rather than a standard course of events for him. Would be a player who would be given good roles, important roles in the team every week. Not necessarily seen as the star of the team, but certainly someone who has a critical role within the team. A good player is a player who has established himself as an AFL player, but has to be playing to his ability to get a game on a regular basis. If he drops off in either health or attitude or form or anything like that, could clearly find himself out of the side. An average player would be, in the list definition, would be a depth player. A player might find himself, in the side from time to time, but would be there more for depth reasons. A fair player is a player who, regularly, they end up on club lists, but generally don't survive on club lists. There might be 2 to 3 to 4 year players who they might scrape together 1 or 2 games, but that would be all that's expected of them. And a poor player is generally someone who comes into your club who quickly find out to be a recruiting error, someone who the wrong judgment was actually made. In regard to what brings you and what creates success for you in the now, basically the players who find themselves in these categories here. So in these 9 squares, if you've got very, very strong playing group in this area, well, you're generally in premiership mode. Particularly if it's weighted, more into these sorts of areas here. And you think of the great teams of the competition now. If you went through and you looked at the Geelong and the St Kilda side, and I think obviously the Western Bulldogs and Collingwood coming into that area as well, you'd find they'd have a lot of great players and a lot of people who are at the peak of their powers in a very mature area. If you're looking at where your list's actually coming from in the future, you're basically looking to build your group in and around guys who come into this area. This is what you're looking to actually build around, with obviously a hope that you can evolve them and develop them into that. But recognising you are still also looking at a predictive element. So you're trying to say, okay, this player at this stage might only be considered an average player, but you're actually got to project him out because you think in the context of what he'll evolve and be over time, he could become an excellent AFL player. And so if you have a look at where our list sits at the moment, we've got a glut of players all in this area. And I also got to say that we have a judgment on a lot of these players that they're actually across this particular area, because that's where they've been drafted at. If players who have been drafted 1s and 2s and 4s and all that stuff in the draft generally have a rating somewhere between a 5, 6 or 7 coming into the system. So your assumption is with good development and good progression that they'll evolve into players who will become the champions of the game. And statistically that's what tends to happen, but that then becomes a challenge for our development coaches in regard to that. We do have a gap in these areas. That's a real issue for us. The club was in premiership mode for a period of time during the mid 2000s, so therefore tended to actually look more short term in its recruiting at that stage, but still brought in some good young talent. You know, a James Fawley, for example, would very much come into that consideration. But what tends to happen is that if you look at each of the clubs, if you did this exercise with Geelong, you'd say, yeah, really strong there, but not much here. If you look at some clubs, you'd say Carlton's got a bit of a spread of both at the moment. Ours is obviously very much in this area here, with a sprinkling of players in other areas. The place you don't want to get to is obviously just having a core of players who are just in these categories here, because that's the sort of almost the Bermuda Triangle of player lists, where you end up with this core of players in there who can get you to 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, but can never actually take you beyond that. And that's where you require a very blunt assessment as to where your group's at any particular time. But for us, it's very much in this area, and that's why we will have there's certain fragility about team performance in the short to medium terms as our players get stronger bodies and greater confidence. But the excitement is that there's no reason why we won't end up within the next 3 to 4 years with a great group of players in that the prime of their careers, moving into that, and not having we're not going to lose 7, 8, 9, 10 players as we have in recent years all in the 1 year. So that's the model. It might be a little exercise for Melbourne supporters to have a bit of a go at it. I'm sure most of you have got yourself your season guide. We don't just do it for our club, but we do it for every club. We go through this, we make judgments, and the judgments are made by our recruiting guys, our forward scouts, Dave Dunbar, Barry Prendergast, Gary Burley, these sorts of guys, and we try and look at where all the other clubs are at, so we get a good sense then of not only where we're at, but also what the competition's going to look like in the future. The matrix itself, features in our red and blue print. It's like that. I won't give you the actual numbers, be TAD confidential, all of that. But I can assure Melbourne supporters that it looks extremely healthy going into the future, and it might be something that I know week to week at the moment it's very, very challenging for everyone, particularly after the weekend. But I can assure you, we've got great reason to be optimistic when it comes to our planning. From the red and blue print, and all of the great thing about our club is all our planning's aligned. All the things we're looking to bring together will be based on a good quality young list as it evolves and as it emerges. So thanks very much for watching and listening, and look forward to the next edition of Whiteboard Wednesday.